Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Astrobloom podcast. I'm your host, Anya Banks, spiritual astrologer and healing guide. And with me today, I have Laura Cheadle. Laura, welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. I'm really looking forward to our conversation.
Same. Yeah, of course, I did, a little bit of digging on your background, and I feel like you have so much wisdom to share. And I would love for you to just introduce yourself on a high level, what it is that you do to the audience, and then we can get into it.
Yeah, that sounds great. I am a burnout and betrayal recovery coach. I work with a lot of high achievers around understanding the wound of betrayal and really alchemizing that into something different because I believe with all my heart and soul that betrayal really is an initiation into something deeper. And it can either take us down and ruin us, or it can launch us into that next level.
Such powerful words. And I think that's really going to resonate with the listeners on Astrobloom because similar to you, I consider myself an alchemist and I always
Mhm.
teach people how to turn their wounds into wisdom and how to sort of release that victimhood mentality because it really keeps us in this very disempowered state, right? When we're
Yeah.
constantly feeling like the victim and feeling like the world is like out to get us, like this is not helpful at all when it comes to like following our purpose and moving on with our life and all of the things. So I love that you take this very like empowered stance to the work that you do and help people in that way.
Yeah, yeah. And that's, likewise, that's what I appreciated so much about you. And a tiny bit more of my background, I was a corporate attorney and I kind of had that belief system that you
Mm-hmm.
can figure things out, you can figure things out, you can think, you can learn. And going through this experience, it was like there are some things you can't figure out intellectually. You have to feel your way through them, you have to process. You need spirit, you need soul, you need all of that deep stuff to really facilitate healing.
Yeah, totally. It's about like having the willingness to look within as well, and like maybe also look at some of the shadow behaviors in our own like relationship patterns. Because I do believe this is actually one question I did want to ask you because I do believe that in every pattern that plays out in a relationship, there's two people in a pattern, right? And it takes one person to
Hmm.
break a pattern, but it also like it had me thinking because I've had my own experiences with betrayal, and I always kind of get thinking about like what role did I play in that, right? Was it my
Yeah.
own fear of betrayal or fear of rejection or fear of abandonment that actually almost like made this happen, that materialized it, right? Or that I attracted it
Right.
into my life? And I'm not saying like we want to blame ourselves, right? Like I said, it takes two people to tango, right? But I'm really curious about that perspective from your experience in working in this realm.
Yeah, absolutely. Early on, in my experience, and just so listeners know, my husband and I were married 23 years when I found out he had been cheating for 15 years with five women.
Wow.
So it was a significant betrayal, and it rocked me to the core. I mean, there was so many layers of trauma on that one.
Mm,
And early on, one of my really dear friends, and she and I, would always like go see Esther Hicks together and do, all of the law of attraction and things like that. And early on, she's like, "What did you do to attract this?" Ask me that same question.
mm,
And it was really hard because on the spiritual part of me knew like there has to be something here, but the human part of me was so, no, I didn't do anything. I wasn't
mm-hmm,
a part of this. I was really victimized. And it took a couple of years, honestly, to kind of figure that whole thing out because no, we're never to blame. We didn't cause it.
mm-hmm.
In my case, what I really saw, instead of instead of the attraction in that way, like what did I do to
Yeah.
manifest this? Yeah, what I started really realizing is the external behaviors that other people were doing to me were the behaviors I was doing to myself. I was betraying myself. I was not honoring me. I was not making space for me. I was not prioritizing me. And
Mm-hmm.
that was the mirror where I finally was like, oh, that's it. I was betraying myself.
Wow, that one hit really hard. I have like goosebumps all over my
Yeah.
back right now just hearing that because I think that's been my biggest lesson. I don't know if you know through listening to the podcast, but I left a 14-year relationship last year. And it wasn't for lack of love or,
Mhm.
all of that. But there was just this like calling to something else for me. And just a lot of I guess development in my own life that exposed to me that like my values were very different than the person that had entered that relationship. But anyway, it was this big mirror of self-abandonment, right? Of
Yeah.
self-betrayal. And that was the biggest thing, is like I felt like I was being abandoned in some ways in this relationship, but it was really because I was abandoning my own, like the call of my soul and my own desires and all of these things. So I love that you were able to really use that experience like as a mirror to some of these unhealed and unintegrated parts of yourself, and use, quite literally, turn that wound into wisdom and that pain into purpose as well, and like help others with that. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's really,
Yeah.
really powerful medicine.
It
So
is
cool.
powerful. It's not fun. It's not fun at all.
No.
But it is powerful. And I think that was also one of those turning points for me. It hurt so bad and it was so awful that it was like, I've got to make this pain mean something, because otherwise going through this much devastation and having no point, I'm not okay with that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not okay with that. This needs to have a purpose. This is too big.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
in my own work, I do help mostly women, I would say, of women who are looking to, who are in the midst of really big life transitions. Either they are making a really big life decision, that's going to have a big impact and lots of grief associated with it, usually, or they've already made a decision or had something happen where they're integrating from that experience. And I mean, it sounds like for you, this was obviously a very big and pivotal moment in your life where you had to really take some time to look inward and like accept maybe some of the roles you were playing in the pattern that was playing out. Yeah, I guess just any words of advice, like moving through such a big life transition like that, for people that might be dealing with betrayal or with just big life change in general.
Yeah, absolutely. I think my first nugget of wisdom is to allow yourself more time than you even think you're going to need. Because if something happens to you, you literally are in a state of shock. And that
Mm-hmm.
shock has to process through your system. And I wish we could just be like, oh yeah, I'm shocked. I'm in shock and I figured it out. It takes so much time. And I think that's the first thing is I as an overachiever, as a doer, as all these things, I was so used to fixing things, taking care of things, being efficient. This is not something that you can fix and take care of and be efficient. It's something that you have to experience. And yes, there are things that you can do. Getting help, I really believe it's essential to get help. There are steps you can do, there are processes that you can do, but also this is one of those things that you have to be in that state of just acceptance and flow. And if it takes 3 months, if it takes 6 months, if it takes a year, if it takes 3 years, you just have to be with what is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And what tools would you recommend people use to be in that state of like surrender to whatever timeline is playing out for you?
Yeah, so many different tools. For me and for a lot of the people that I work with, movement is a big one. Whether it's walking, whether it's yoga, whether it's dance, just moving somehow, because we can get so locked in and then our energy swirls and then our stomach hurts and then we feel nauseous and our eyes feel like they're popping out of our head. And just to have some sort of movement to start processing that. And what I love about movement is when you're focusing on the moves, again, whether it's yoga, walking, it doesn't matter. You've got a direction and you're flowing, but you're also allowing that subconscious mind to start processing. And you're not observing it as much as you are when you're just sitting there thinking about your thinking. And answers come in. Answers
Mm-hmm.
always drop in after a movement session.
Yeah, I completely resonate with that. I was having a bit of a day the other day, kind of coming down with like this cold that I'm getting over, and took everything I had in me to just be like, I'm gonna go for a walk. And every time I go for a walk, like I just have so much clarity, so many downloads coming through. And I think there's really something there. Like I saw a post the other day talking about, bilateral movement specifically, whether it is with like sports that are like more flowy, like even just like downhill skiing, biking through the forest, trail running, whatever, but also just walking. Like it has that
Yeah.
bilateral stimulation and it actually helps process trauma in the body, right? And I think
Yes.
movement in and of itself just helps. It helps discharge like stagnant energy, like the emotions that maybe get stuck in these traumatic experiences that we have, right? It's something I definitely employ quite a bit in my work, as I'm a yoga teacher and also facilitate ecstatic dance. But
Yeah.
so important to discharge that energy and like regulate our nervous system through movement. So I love that you brought that up.
Yeah, yeah, it's really important. And then I think the other thing too, kind of similar to that, is just silence. Because we are in a do society. And sometimes we think if I'm going to sit down, I have to meditate or I have to journal and it's like, no, just sit there. Just sit there for 3 minutes and
Mhm.
see what comes up. It might be uncomfortable. You might want to doze off. You just sit 3 minutes, just be in silence.
Yeah, yeah. I think sometimes we get in our heads about, meditation has to look a certain way. It has to be this amount in length for it to be effective. But I think especially if you're someone who's not comfortable with sitting in silence for long periods of time, like you said, 3 minutes can make a huge difference.
Yeah,
Just noticing what thoughts are coming up, right? Like bringing that level of awareness back in to just take a look at like what is there? What are the looping thoughts that run through my mind? And like, do I want those thoughts to be there? I think
exactly.
awareness is such a powerful tool.
It is. It is. And it's interesting because I think for many of us, we think that we're aware, but then when we really start studying our awareness, it's like awareness of what? Because we get locked into being aware of the same looping thoughts, and that's not really awareness.
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
totally. It kind
Yeah.
of becomes this like mind fuck in some ways when you think about it, right?
Totally.
Yeah, it's almost like when you start to think about like the breadth of the universe and then your mind just can't comprehend that it doesn't end. Like that's almost how I sometimes experience like looking at my own thoughts and belief patterns and like perspective
Yes.
shifts and all of the things.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So kind of on that thread, I am curious, because we're sort of talking about, like thought patterns, beliefs, all of these things. I am wondering, like in this experience, I find that, of course, like big kind of shocks to the system or big life changes often challenge like our core beliefs, right? They challenge
Yes.
the way that we see the world. They challenge what we think about ourselves in relation to the world, about our relationships, all of that. So I am curious, like through this experience and all the healing that you've done after it, and maybe even mirrored in the work that you do with your clients, like maybe what are some core like beliefs that were really brought up for you and that you had to kind of look at and maybe restructure?
Yeah, absolutely. This whole twisty thing around perfection and performing. And who am I? Because I went to law school. I always got good grades. I always did things right. I always wanted to do
Mm,
things perfect. And it challenged me so much between why am I doing this? Because for so many years, I'd be like, because this is who I am, because I am a high achiever, because I want to do things perfectly. I'm doing it because I like it. And really starting to strip that away, why am I performing this? What parts of me do truly enjoy striving for things because I like challenging myself? What parts of me are really seeking to please others, to perform up to somebody else's standards, or to conform? And why is that a self-worth thing? Because I feel like I have great self-worth. I feel like I have great self-esteem. What's going on? Is it my proving my worth because a lineage of being, females and female oppression throughout history. Like, what is this? And it took so long to really start unpacking that perfectionism, that performance, that belief that I had to succeed, and that those external markers of success somehow meant I was doing it right because I wanted to do things right. And it's like, what is right? And what does it mean to do things right? And that's a
mm,
lot to unpack. And I've unpacked a lot of it. And it's still kind of that juxtaposition. How do I strive to do the right thing? How do I strive to create good in the world? How do I strive to live up to my capacity? And yet at the same time, be be messy, be vulnerable, be wrong, be, accidentally harm somebody. Like, how do you hold all of that at the same time? How do I integrate the shadow into everything that I do? Because I have it. We all have it, and it's okay to have it.
mm. Yeah, like it's okay to be an imperfect human being because no one is perfect.
Yeah.
That's definitely been a big one for me too. Like just I think it's my Virgo stellium, you know. We tend to
Right.
like to be perfectionists. So and I think collectively right now too, it's a very resonant belief to be working with, or I guess, yeah, thing to be working with, just because we have the South Node. I don't know if you're familiar with astrology at all, but the South Node is kind of like our collective karma, and it's in Virgo right now. And right now, Venus is right next to that as well. So we're really looking at like what are some core values that are structured around perfectionism and like being in control and knowing all of the things. And when do we just surrender into the fact that we don't know everything and we don't know what we don't know, and like
Hmm.
that's not a bad thing. It just leaves room for more magic and for more kind of flow and surrender and for the universe to surprise us, right? So it really, like,
Yes.
I think it takes a big weight off your shoulders when you can accept that like you don't know everything, and no, you're not perfect, and you're allowed to not be perfect. So I love that
Right.
reflection.
Yeah. And the perfection isn't the goal anyway. Yeah, that's something that I remind myself of all the time. Perfection isn't the goal. And that's really tough conditioning to break out of. And one of my husband's phrases early on that he had gotten from his dad, which is so toxic, but it was like, do a better job, do a better job. And whatever you're doing, do a better job. And it's like, why? That's not the standard. Perfection is not the standard.
Mm. And also what defines a better job or what defines what is right, right? It's so
Yeah.
subjective. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
totally.
So yeah,
I
it's
am
it's hard.
curious. Yeah, it is for sure. It's a hard one to break because I think in our society we really breed, perfectionism, having the perfect body, having the perfect this, like all of the things. So there's a certain image that I think, especially as women, we're taught to like work
Big
towards.
time. Yeah.
And we just have to accept that like we're never gonna live to that because it's not realistic and everyone is so uniquely different and our bodies are different and our lives are different and our gifts are different and that's actually a gift. It's not
Right.
something that's to be looked down upon. It's a blessing. So
Right.
yeah,
Right.
I am curious about your astrology though, since we're on that topic, kind of. Do you know your big three?
No, I'm Aquarius.
Okay,
Um,
you're an Aquarius
but
sun.
yeah, but I don't know. I have known them in the past, and for some reason, I cannot keep them in my head. I
That's okay.
believe, yeah, I was going to say, I believe it's a Cancer rising,
Okay.
but I don't know the other.
Okay. Yeah, no worries. I mean, Aquarius even just speaks a lot to like, breaking through some of these norms, right?
Yeah,
Thinking outside the box and not kind of, yeah, conforming, I guess.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I
No,
like
and
that.
it's true because it's been an interesting ride of conforming and non-conforming. And one of the things that I do in my work is I use the concept of burlesque. And I know you do all the, somatic and ecstatic dance. And I use burlesque kind of in an ecstatic dance realm of
Mm.
releasing those coverings, releasing those layers to show what's underneath in all of its glorious imperfection. Because
Mm.
on the outside, we dress to make ourselves perfect. We use the corset to tie in the waist, the bra to perk up the breasts, the makeup, the lips to enhance, the lashes to enhance. And burlesque is about removing those layers to really reveal what's underneath.
Oh, that's really cool. I never thought about it that way, but I have been drawn to burlesque for some time. I think largely for me, like because I dance is such an outlet for me, but also because I love like putting together like costumes and channeling like different
Yes.
kind of personalities and personas. So I love that that's a channel for you. How did you get into that?
Yeah. When I danced my whole life, I was always a dancer. And then when I was 44, I started taking pole dancing classes, and the studio had burlesque classes there. And I took a couple, and I was like, this is so fun. And then I auditioned for a troupe that was a traveling troupe, to Vegas and New Orleans and all the places. And I got accepted to it. So I danced for a long time all over the United States. It was a ton of fun. And then it's busy. It's busy.
Hmm.
It's
Yeah.
hard to create all the things. It takes a lot of creative energy.
Yeah.
And through COVID, I kind of let that go. But that's when I really created yoga-esque. You'll have to take one of my classes sometime because
Yeah, that sounds really
it's
cool.
a combination of like the Kundalini yoga and the burlesque.
Okay.
Mhm.
I love the sound of that. Kundalini's comes up so often for me, but I have this like resistance to it. And it's probably because
Uh-huh.
I need to do more of it. I find it's I
Exactly right.
always stick to my like realm of, vinyasa, flowy, whatever. But no, I do enjoy Kundalini. Like every time I do it, I feel so much better after, but I think it's the initial hump of like I guess it's just because I've gone to some classes that have been like quite like activating and regimented, and I'm just like, this is so
Nah.
much.
Yeah. No, I hear that. And that's not, I don't do the regimented thing either. I
Okay,
make my
amazing.
Kundalini flowy.
Okay, I like that. I like that. Because yeah, I think I just have an aversion to like yoga that's like very militant in style. Like even just like Bikram
Uh-huh.
yoga and stuff. I'm like,
Yeah.
the whole thing aside with Bikram himself, but like just the style of yoga, even, I'm like, I can't. Like it feels like I'm
No.
like being yelled at in a yoga
Right. It feels like punishment to
studio.
me. I'm like, but my body wants to be here.
Yeah, exactly. So no, that sounds really lovely. I would love to attend one of those. It's I also blend astrology and yoga, so that's kind of fun that we have like two modalities that we blend together.
I love that. I love it.
Yeah.
Astrology is one of those things that I know tiny bits about, and I wish I knew more. So I love that you do that because what a great way to bring it all in and pass that
Mm.
knowledge down.
Yeah, and it's totally like it is something that I think there's a lot of misconceptions around, like people think that it's like this fortune telling tool and all the things, but really it's a
Right.
language and it's a language of energy and energy is all around us, whether we choose to engage with it or not, it's still engaging with us. So we might as well have the awareness, right, to kind of move through it with consciousness versus kind of have it happen and be victims of it, you know? So that's the way
Right.
I see it.
Right. Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree. I like that.
Yeah, yeah. The other thing that we were kind of talking about briefly there with your Aquarius energy that came through is sort of being this bridge between like conforming and not conforming. And it's really interesting because I actually, just before we got on this call, I was actually writing an article draft. I'm working on an article that kind of talks about my experience of uncovering my own true values and sort of what that led to in my life, which I mean, it led to like me leaving my past relationship, marriage, my community in Ontario, like so I'm in Canada, and moving to the West Coast to BC, and just the the home and the grounding and everything that I found here.
Hmm.
And so the one thing that I realized is the common thread in all of that is like even though it looked like oh maybe the where I was living was a problem or the relationship was the problem or like what I was doing for work was the problem, those were really just mirrors of my own problem with like the fact that I had conformed to a life that was very conventional on the surface. And it actually wasn't what I truly desired deep down. So I'm
Yes.
wondering, yeah, I would love to hear your thoughts on that, and maybe your experience with that dynamic in your life, because you alluded to having had that dynamic. So yeah,
Yes. Yeah, very much. I mean, even going from an attorney to a burlesque dancer, that is very non-conforming. You know, people are like, well, what
yeah,
happened? Nothing happened. I wanted to do this. It is my desire. Similarly, one of the things that I'm so passionate about in the infidelity space is my husband and I are still together. Yes, he cheated for 15 years with 5 women, and it cracked us both open, and we both went on a healing journey, and we both ended up back together. And again, that was bucking the narrative that leave, take him for all he's worth, you know, have your self-respect. I would have said that. If somebody would have said to me, what would happen if your husband cheated? I would be like, I am so out of here. That's what you're supposed to do. I didn't.
mm,
You're not supposed to talk about it. It's embarrassing. It's shame. I want to talk about it. We need to talk about it. There's the stigma there that shouldn't be there. Whether it's, sex or betrayal or whatever it is, the things that we fear that we try to hide, those are the things that we need to talk about the most. And I feel like
mm,
that's one of my biggest non-conforming points. Another way that I really, because that resonates with me on so many different levels. I said I danced growing up. I danced growing up. I was a ballet dancer. I was a cheerleader through college. Like I did all the things. So people would say, you can't be smart. You're cute. You can't be smart. You're fit. What does that have to do with anything? Do you know how many
yeah,
times people would say, you don't look like a lawyer? Really? What does a lawyer look like? You tell me,
yeah,
because I am one. And then same thing on the spiritual end. Well, you channel, you can't be a lawyer who channels. Why not? I am. Just
yeah,
those beliefs that we have to be one thing.
yeah.
No, I can be a daughter, a wife, a mom, an aunt, a friend, a cousin. I could be sacred and profane all in the same breath because that's who I am.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, our sexuality is our spirituality. Like our
Yeah.
sexual energy is our spiritual energy and vice versa. So I totally get that. Yeah, I love how you bridged so many different topics there. One of the things that isn't exactly related to that, but that I wanted to pick up the thread on before I forget is I find it incredibly inspiring and really like a hallmark of like the amount of healing that can happen between two people that you and your husband are still together. um
Yeah.
as someone who has dealt with like patterns of betrayal before, that was the one thing for me that I just could not seem to get over, I guess. Like I
Hmm.
couldn't regain that trust, I couldn't rebuild. And I
Hmm.
wonder, what do you think helped you in kind of being able to reestablish that relationship? Yeah,
Yeah. Many, 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 many different things. Um, having, you can't trust somebody who's not trustworthy. And I think that's the first thing because so many people will reach out to me and they're like, I want to repair my marriage too. Well, great, but you can't do it if your partner truly isn't there and isn't willing. And my partner was not interested at first. It'd be like, why did you cheat? Because you're a bitch and you forced me to it. That energy, that you're not going to go anywhere with that. It wasn't until he broke down his defenses and he started addressing this is longstanding trauma. He was a severely abused child. He had never addressed that trauma. So he starts addressing his past. He starts reconnecting to his spirituality. He starts making amends. He starts telling me what's going on. He starts sharing his heart, his soul, his spirit. Suddenly, this is a person that I can trust because I do know him and I see all these masks have fallen off of him and I see all these cracks that are letting the light in. So it gets established because it makes sense, because you
Mm.
see that they become a trustworthy person.
Because
And
there's a level of vulnerability there and an accountability and like a willingness to do the work to break the pattern, right? That they're
yes,
in. Yeah.
yes. And part of that too, like when we were going through this, I said, I am speaking my truth. My truth includes this experience with you. I'm not throwing you under the bus, but I'm talking about what you did and I'm talking about who you did it with. And I'm sharing all of this. And, his response to that is, God, that feels humiliating and that feels really hard. And yes, you must because it's part of our journey and I can stand in this.
Mhm.
I mean, that's
Yeah.
that's trust.
That's huge because yeah, I mean, as someone who obviously talks about their personal experience as well, there's so many barriers of like fear and fear of judgment, particularly from people in sort of my past life when I start to talk about these personal topics. And I
Mhm.
wonder, how do you cope with that? Like, how do you both cope with the fear of judgment maybe that comes up as you're sharing something so deeply personal and, like you said, something that is quite unconventional in a way, right? The things that we
Yeah.
often hide and feel a lot of shame about.
Hmm. What we have both noticed is usually the fear of the judgment is worse than the judgment.
Okay.
We have experienced actually very little judgment,
Mm,
and so many people have thanked us for sharing it and have said, I've had this experience. I never wanted to speak about it. My mom had this experience. My sister had this experience. When you look at the statistics, horrible things happen to a lot of people. They say
yes.
70% of relationships have some sort of infidelity and betrayal in them. 70%? Oh my gosh, that's a lot. We're
Yeah.
normal. You're normal. Whatever it is, people think I'm alone. This is weird. I'm going to be judged. And usually, when you speak from a place of honesty, from a place of
Hmm.
non-judgment, from a place of acceptance yourself, it tends to bring people in. And the people that
Yeah.
have judged us, which have not been a lot, that's fine. That's your business. You don't have to be involved with me anymore if it bothers you, but I'm fine.
Yeah. I do find in my experience too, like anytime I have shared anything really vulnerable with like, my followers, my email list, whatnot, it's like more often than not, I actually get people writing back to me and saying like, wow, that really hit home for me. Like, thank you so much for sharing. Because I think it gives people this feeling of like validation and being seen and not feeling alone in their experience. That is what creates connection. Like I firmly believe that vulnerability and sharing your truth, no matter how hard it is actually what creates intimacy that we crave as human beings at the end of the day.
Yeah, yeah. And that sense of belonging.
Yeah.
Now we know you're not perfect. I can share too.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting how it all ties back into the perfectionism too, eh?
I know, right?
Yeah. Um, I'm wondering, is there anything that you feel called to share? Because I know that you have your like, let me get this right. Librarians are sort of your soul family, soul guides that you
Yeah,
establish the connection with as a result of this kind of awakening in your life.
yeah, it's really
Yeah.
interesting. The librarians are a collective of entities, both on the galactic level and also the guardians of the earth plane. And what
Okay.
they do is they collect the records of all souls, of all beings experiencing that lesson. So, like when you think
Mm,
about your Akashic records, it's my soul's journey. What have I gone through? It's very individual, but the librarians collect the records around the experiences.
mm,
So, betrayal, how many souls and entities have experienced that? What are all of those lessons that those souls have experienced? That's in a volume, so to speak, that the librarians
mm,
preserve. So, it can be the experience of judgment, abandonment, betrayal, persecution. All of that wisdom is collected by the librarians. What they have told me is as humanity evolves, there are certain soul lessons that when enough of us have experienced, we will no longer have to experience it again on this
mm.
planet. Some of the
That's
examples
amazing.
like that, something that's coming up right now, like a lot of war energy is coming up right now. War energy is something that we can move through. and we can evolve. And as a collective, we can say, we've been there, done that. We've learned all the lessons that we need to collectively for more. We can put this aside and not go there again.
Hmm. I mean, wouldn't that be nice?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And that's why so much of this is coming up right now. It's like we're at that crux, that turning point. Are we going to learn these lessons and agree as humanity that this is a boundary that we're not going into, or do we need some more lessons around this?
Hmm.
And I started channeling it's interesting. I started being aware that I was channeling them after my experience. But looking back, this is the voice that has been with me forever.
Yeah, isn't that always how it happens? It's like, oh, this thing that I thought was just like normal or just
Yeah.
my intuition speaking to me is actually this other thing, right? It's
Yeah.
funny how that happens. I've noticed that a lot in my own life with astrology cycles and noticing that like certain archetypes and energies I was working with like my whole life, were really the pivotal times where I made some big life decisions, for example. So yeah, that's really cool. it,
Hmm.
it really shows also how some of these experiences that are so painful and so difficult can be alchemized into a greater purpose. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Because for me, it was helpful to understand it's not just my soul lesson. The
Hmm.
things that I'm learning, I really can share with other souls. It's kind of like
Yeah.
the what is it, the 100 monkey theory that after 100 monkey does this behavior, then it becomes collective behavior and everybody does
Yeah.
it. And that everybody else out there also is learning on my behalf. So there's so much gratitude. I can see you and your journey and I can feel gratitude instead of judgment that, oh my gosh, you're going through what? It's like,
Hmm.
great, you can take that poverty lesson and you can learn that. Thank you. I will take the betrayal lesson and I will share it. Yes, you're welcome. Over there,
Hmm.
they can do persecution. Wonderful. You take that. Thank you. Over here, I'll do because we're learning as a group. We're not just, it's the waves in the ocean. We're all learning.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and I think it's like if we can all just take these things that we're learning and share them with one another, it's just such a powerful tool to give
Yeah.
back, you know? Yeah.
Oh,
And
yeah.
speaking of tools, I know you mentioned in your email to me that you have a new book. Would you care to tell people what it's about?
Yeah, absolutely. And how I'm going to explain it, I've got two books. One is the inner work and
Okay.
one is the external work. And I think it's important to have both. My newest book is called It's Not Burnout, It's Betrayal: 5 Tools to Fuel Up and Thrive. And that is on how we relate to people in the external world, how we set and manage our expectations, how we set and manage boundaries, how we advocate effectively on our own behalf. But we can only do that when we've done the inner work. In the inner work, that book is called Flaunt: Drop Your Cover and Reveal Your Smart, Sexy, and Spiritual Self. And that's how to do everything that we were talking about, how to strip off those labels, those roles, those scripts, how to connect with your truth, your value, your core message, your core missions, and then how to know yourself so you can show yourself. And once you know yourself and then you show yourself, then the Fuel Up book is on. Now, how do I interact with others? Being myself and not protecting.
Yeah. Yeah, I do think that so many of our ways that we engage in connection are built on protective mechanisms that we learned like to keep us safe, right? And so
Yes.
it really ties in well to just this recent full moon that we had yesterday in Aries, the Aries super full moon, because the polarity of Libra and Aries was illuminated. And I actually just wrote a blog yesterday about it. And it's very much this when I think of Aries and Libra, because Aries is the self and Libra is relationships. I always think
Huh.
of the balance of attachment and authenticity because Aries wants to be authentic. It wants to be like, I am, but Libra wants to exist in relationship, in a harmonious relationship. And so Libra then asks, if I am, can I still be loved for who I am? Can I still have the connection that I crave as I am? And often that balance is really programmed into us through our early childhood experiences. Were we accepted for who we were? Or maybe have we become so protective of who we are that we don't open ourselves up to relationships? And it's really illuminating, I think, collectively, this balance between
Mm.
those two. So I love that that kind of mirrors what you're talking about
It
with your two
absolutely
books.
does. Yeah, it
Yeah.
absolutely does. I can't wait to read that blog because, yes, and so often we, going back to the performance and perfection, I will perform and I will be who I think you want me to be. And I will look the way I think you want me to look. And
Yeah.
then, okay, well, I have to be this now because that was the only way that you loved me. And that's that self-abandonment right there.
Exactly. And then when we abandon ourselves, other people mirror that to us and abandon us. So
Yeah.
it all comes back to that inner work. And you're so right in saying like that is the starting point, right? Because the way that we treat ourselves, the way that we connect to our authenticity is going to attract the types of people that are in our lives. And if it weeds out people, as well.
Mhm.
Like we have to also be willing to see that and to let them go, because we have to trust that when we are ourselves, we're only going to attract the right relationships and the right people in the right situations that are able to hold space for who we are. So
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah, so much. And then also in communication is the medium of connection. Yes, there's energy. Yes, there's frequency. Yes, there's all that. But as humans, we do have to talk. We do have to learn how to say things and how to find the right words to bring in the connection that we want to express all that's going on inside. That's a whole different level too, because I have this deep, rich inner world. And if I want to show it to you and if I want to see yours, and how do we do that? And
Yeah.
that advocacy piece and that interaction piece, it's a dance.
Yeah, totally. And it's like, how do you speak the same? Because oftentimes we don't speak the same language, right? Our inner world is so different than another. So how do you like learn to speak the language that each other communicates in? I think that's such another like important gift when it comes to relating to another person. And I think there just has to be the willingness to work on that as well, if it doesn't come inherently, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm often telling my people, like, every conversation is two conversations. It's the facts and it's the feelings. And on what level are
Hmm.
you speaking? If we're talking facts, what time do we meet? Let's be clear about that. If we're talking feelings, what time do we meet? Because you're always late and then it ticks me off. That's a whole different conversation.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. There's like the whole story that comes along with the history of a relationship as well,
Yeah.
and the feelings and the emotions that get triggered. And that's often why, I think when we are feeling triggered in relationship, and it seems like such a disproportionate like response to something very small, like, oh, you're late, and now I've like blown up at you because you're late one
Yes.
more time. It's like, what's actually underneath that? What history is underneath that? And not even just relating to that person. It's like it's probably a much larger dynamic that we need to look at in ourselves that's caused that reaction, right? So yeah,
Yeah.
for every action there's a reaction, I guess.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah. Well, I'm just taking a look at the time and we only have a few minutes left. So I wanted to yeah, just kind of flip it back to you to share any last kind of thoughts, anything that you feel called to share, I think, with the audience.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that I feel called to share is wherever you're at, it's fine. Whatever you've done in the past, wrong, it's fine. It's that learning that you can carry forward. I hope that everybody listening to the show, doesn't walk away thinking like, oh, I had this great experience and I blew it because I didn't alchemize my pain into purpose. Doesn't matter. You can do that at any time. There's no expiration on this. It's an initiation. The door is open. Walk through the door whenever you're ready, however long it takes you. You are truly in the perfect place. Whatever wisdom you have gathered along the way, sometimes you don't know that you've gathered it until 6 miles down the road when you look back and then
Yeah.
you realize, oh, this meant something. So you're right where you need to be right now.
I love that. Thank you so much for that very important reminder, Laura. I think, yeah, timing is always divine, and we can't control it. And sometimes it takes months to integrate a lesson, and sometimes it takes a lifetime. So I think that's
Yeah,
a very, very useful reminder for people to have.
good.
I will link Laura's links in the show notes so that you know where to find her, and also where to find her books. And yeah, thank you so much for your time. It was such a pleasure talking with you, and I know everyone's going to love this episode. So thanks
Thank
everyone for
you.
listening. Have a lovely day.